This is Dr. Carol Heinrich. We're going to be dealing with the legal and ethical issues as part of Module 2 this week. The materials presented in that we're going to be going over today have been provided by GNEC, which is the Geriatric Nursing Education Consortium, which is a national initiative to help increase the educational background of senior level baccalaureate nursing students. We're going to talk a little bit about the laws first. Again, there's federal regulations and laws as well as state level regulation and laws. They're going to vary state level from one state to the other. Federal covers all states the same way. There is the Medicare insurance program, which we talked about last week, that provides financial support for hospitalization, medications, laboratory testing, but again, it's not full coverage, but again, there is financial support for that. The Omnibus Budget Reconciliation Act of 1987, we're going to address that a little bit, as well as the Older Americans Act in the next few slides. HIPAA is not any different for older adults than with any other age population. All right, the Older Americans Act. Again, this started looking at the care for healthcare services provided in long-term care nursing facilities. Again, back in 1988, they wanted it to have a contact person. So if there was any question about the care being provided in long-term care facilities, there was a person that family member, staff can go to for help to improve the care being provided. Again, then there's the Older Adult Abuse and Protective Services. Again, in this module, there is a written assignment that you guys are working on that has to do with elder abuse. Elder abuse does happen in today's world here in the United States as well as abroad. But again, we need, as nurses and healthcare providers, to be able to assess for this and know when intervention and intervening is necessary. So again, as a person increases in age, sometimes their functional status and their mental ability may lead to changes in where they're living. They may have to move in with a family member, move in with a brother or a sister. So again, the whole living situation may be changing as someone's chronic illness. As they begin to live with chronic illness, their functional status may be becoming a little bit decreased. So again, these changing conditions and abilities of the older adult may lead to some form of neglect or exploitation. Domestic elder abuse is abuse that's by someone who has a relationship with the older adult, such as a family member or caregiver. It usually happens within a home setting. Institutional elder abuse is abuse that occurs in residential institutions, such as group homes, long-term care facilities, usually by someone who is paid to provide care for that older adult. And again, it's physical abuse as well as mental or emotional abuse. Self-neglect or self-abuse is when a person who makes the decision not to provide care for himself anymore. Your role as a nurse, you need to be able to be vigilant and look for symptoms of elder abuse. You now know that and realize that elder abuse does take place in our society today. So again, be alert for it. Try to assess for it when you're every interaction that takes place with you and an older adult. Most states have mandatory reporting requirements for healthcare providers such as nurses. So again, if there's a reasonable suspicion of elder abuse, you don't have to have validation with evidence. As long as there's a reasonable suspicion that you need to report it. Right? And failure to report it, if it's required by law, can lead for criminal charges. So again, look to see the state in which you live. They may not have mandatory reporting, but as an ethical healthcare provider, you have the need and the value that you place on something like elder abuse, and the need to report it should take precedent. So if there's a reasonable suspicion of elder abuse, you need to step up and do something about it. Nursing facility reform, we're talking about long-term care facilities, nursing homes. Again, it's the Omnibus Budget Reconciliation Act, based on a study by the Institute of Medicine. We're going back as far back as 1987. They said that they need to improve and promote the health and welfare of older adults residing in long-term care facilities. So there are changes that took place from 1987 until this day to improve the care in long-term care facilities. And again, these are the three major points of the OBRA Declaration. Long-term care facilities are now surveyed and again to be certified. Again, if they do not apply to these standards, then they're, again, based on state level, there may be some penalties or sanctions for that. Now we're going to lead toward the ethical side of this week's discussion, this week's interaction. It's called autonomy and self-determination. Really, this pertains to all age groups of people, but again, as we hit the age of 65 or maybe 85 and plus, the ability to make these decisions and determination is what's coming under scrutiny. All right, so self-determination and autonomy has to do with every side of someone's medical treatment and care. And again, the big question is, when do we stop life support or life prolonging measures? So again, we're talking about nutrition, we're talking about intubation and ventilator support. Those are the two key areas, and hydration with IV fluids. As when does that stuff stop? All right. Again, the decision for a person to be able to, and be capable to make these decisions is based on the same principles of informed consent. The person has to be competent and provided with information that allows him to make the decision if he wants the treatment or if he doesn't want the treatment. Again, competent is defined here as your textbook defines it. It's one who is able to understand the proposed treatment or procedure and thereby make an informed decision. DNR, we've all come into contact with in clinical practice, and again, it's an order from a physician which specifically states that healthcare providers not to use or order specific methods of therapy, and they will list them: hydration, IVs, CPR. You should be following that. Again, those of you working in clinical practice have probably come into some ethical dilemmas regarding do not resuscitate orders. Again, it falls under the advanced medical directives. Again, people should inform their family members, their significant others, their healthcare providers about these questions while they're still of sound mind and able to make those decisions. Again, they should also designate a person to convey their wishes at the time when they're unable to do that. There's living wills, and there's also the healthcare agents to speak for the person. There's a durable power of attorney, person who will make healthcare decisions, as well as the general power of attorney. Patient will make decisions about financials and signing off on the checks. And again, so there's two different types. And again, the living wills and the advanced directives will cover both of those aspects. All right, often there's conflicts between what the directives, advanced directives regarding healthcare decisions, and what the family wants. Again, those of you who have experience with ethical dilemmas in the clinical practice setting have probably come across this. This time you would have a patient who had an advanced directive and a living will who says they do not want life support. Again, then you have the family members who may not have had that conversation with that patient, or before this event happened, or you may have family members who live out of state and haven't had that close contact and information. So there's disagreement among the family. But again, legally, those advanced directives, again, it's a very hazy area, and hopefully the nurse or the physicians will hold a family meeting and try to discuss and interact and find out and come to an agreement of some sort as to which way to go. But again, in some states it has shown that the physicians have immunity, and they could follow in good faith the wishes of the client by the advanced directives. But again, there is still a very legal, hazy area over how strong those advanced directives are and if they would really hold up against family wishes. Patient Self-Determination Act is all related to this, and again, Since 1991, hospitals on admission, long-term care facilities, and other healthcare providers have to provide written information about this, and they have to understand their rights about refusing or accepting treatment once they become injured or incapacitated. Again, the Cruzan case is the Nancy Cruzan case back in 1983, probably way before your times, even thinking about what nursing is. And she was a 25-year-old who was involved in a car accident, and it happened up in New Jersey, so that's why I'm more familiar with this than probably some of the other people. She was in a vegetative state after in an acute care center, and again, she was intubated and was hydrated and maintained on a ventilator for quite a long period of time. The family wanted them to stop life support and stop everything. There was no advance directive. There was no living will. There was no anything that was written to explain what her thoughts were. And again, she was only 25, so why would she even have those conversations with her family or significant others? So again, they had to remove her from the acute care setting into another long-term care setting where they still wanted to withdraw life support, the ventilator. But again, that agency would not do it, so then she went to another long-term care facility, and they got the okay that they could withdraw the intubation and life care support, and she still lived. She was still getting fed through a feeding tube. And again, 1990, this is 7 years later, the U.S. Supreme Court said that they cannot remove the feeding and hydration. So again, they were unable to carry out that request, and eventually she did die, but so many years later. So again, that added that we do need living wills, advanced medical directives, and the Patient Self-Determination Act. Again, this explains how hospitals and agencies are required to distribute the materials about the Patient Self-Determination Act and advanced medical directives. Again, as a nurse, it's your responsibility to understand what the laws of the state are in which you practice, as well as some of the strengths and the pros. Again, we mentioned some of the limitations of the advanced directive. And again, you want to make sure informed decision-making takes place. Again, the concept of health literacy comes into play. How well does the family and patients understand the information that's being provided to them? Again, they have the ethics and the end-of-life care. These principles of autonomy, beneficence, non-maleficence, justice, and veracity pertain to the older adults as well as they do to the people in the other age groups receiving health care. Decision-making ability in older adults is what all of this comes down to. If an advanced directive isn't in place from previously, again, you as the nurse and healthcare providers have to assist in the determination if an older adult is able to make decisions. And again, before it is shown that they're unable to make these decisions, you have to abide by the thought that the person can make decisions no matter how dangerous or how important or vital the decisions are. And if an older adult is able to make the decision, has that capacity, family members should not be asked, should not be approached when that older adult patient has made that decision. This is 5 ways, again, that relate to the ability of an older adult to make a decision. So again, the number 1 goes back to what we talked about earlier. Older adults have the capacity until proven otherwise. And again, there's different ways to help determine if capacity is there. And again, you can just read over some of those statements about how to determine disability. Informed consent needs to be made. Once the decisional capacity has been determined, then again the information has to be given to the person and they weigh the options. Again, the more vital, like the example on the previous slide about an amputation as compared to a food choice, if a patient has the capacity to make the decision, they have to know what the options are. Amputation or not amputation, and treating it medically with antibiotics. And then you have to understand the risks of septicemia and the dangers of that. So again, informed consent and informed decisions go hand in hand. Again, here is, again, older adults need the opportunity to make decisions. And there's also ethics committee to help us work through these ethical dilemmas.